All right, part 4, day 4. The prosecution has just finished crossing this witness, Amanda Guglielmi. I could be butchering that. My chicken scratch. I try to take notes as quickly as possible. I apologize. She is a specialist in forensics, therapy, psychology, forensic psychology, and she evaluated her. She was appointed by the court. I guess the prosecution had reached out to her. So the prosecution just got done talking to her, and she was feeling queasy. A lot of stuff they were going over, so she was feeling queasy, thinking about the incident, or she's queasy about being in jail and that somebody's going to jump her, this kind of thing. Now, they put her away from the other inmates because she's a minor. They kept her alone, but this lady said, well, that's probably just normal. That's not really a psychosis, I guess. That's my little pea brain gathering. But she was saying that it was unusual for somebody being 6 years old and claiming they heard voices. And she said it was a man's voice. This is Carly saying this to her, that it was a man's voice, and that she would just block it out. But she heard the voice all the time, that she would just block it out. And she was saying this is very unusual. And I thought so too, with experience with mentally ill people in my family, that did they show signs of behavioral problems when they were young? Yeah, but not voices. That didn't come until later. Late teens, early 20s, this started manifesting into that. So, and then I'm not an expert, so I didn't mention that, like thinking, well, that's kind of early for a kid. I mean, I thought about it, but I didn't really want to, because I don't know. She's saying it is unusual for that to happen. And she said Carly was feeling detached when her mom yelled at her. I mean, people feel detached when they're in a traumatic situation. It's been documented on other people, but for her, her mom's fussing at her, and she's just going to be detached. There's been no evidence that I have seen that her mother was abusive to her, that this would be a traumatic experience, her mother fussing at her. That's just my opinion. And then she also said that Carly was feeling detached in the jail, because she's kind of segregated. She's by herself a lot, except for the interaction with the guards, and she was feeling detached, and that she would kind of space out. Well, I guess you would, guys. If you were by yourself most of the day, you're only going to see the guard when he's going to bring you lunch, breakfast, and dinner. You know, she's there all day by herself, or if she gets to come out and have a call with her grandparents or a visit, if I'm sure, I would think that's been happening. Nobody's mentioned that, but I'm sure they have. And they didn't go over intrusive memories, and she said she recorded her meeting, which was over 5 hours, and with breaks and stuff, she had like 4 hours of conversation and, evaluating Carly. So they've got 4 hours of video, and that her attorney, Miss Todd, was there with them. And apparently she reached out to the stepdad, this Amanda lady, and reached out to the stepdad to interview him because she wants more information. She wants as much information as she can get, and then evaluating Carly, which is a good thing. And he wanted his attorney present, and she said, yeah, sure. And then he never called her back. Inquiring minds want to know, why would he not want to talk to her? Did he think that she was going to be biased against Carly when she is. I'm sure his attorney explained to him what this lady's position is. It doesn't matter. She's called by the court. Her evaluation is to look at everything, and it doesn't matter whose side it falls on. Right? So I don't understand why he would not want him to talk to her. Right? Inquiring minds want to know. I think that's about what I've got in my notes of what the prosecution went over with her and what was revealed. Her mood swings, we talked about that. The pot. Did she smoke? She didn't smoke that day. We knew that from Dr. Clark, but apparently she brought up the THC that is out now in a lot of the marijuana, that it can cause delusions. But she didn't smoke pot that day. I want to know what was her toxicology. Okay, so now let's get into this. So right now, I stopped it right where I left off on the other video, so I don't know if they're having a sidebar. I took a little break too. The defense is getting up to cross-examine her. So let's get things ready, and let's see what the cross is going to be. How is the defense going to attack this? Here we go.
Lunch is here and set up and ready for y'all, so we're going to take a recess till at least 12:30. Remember not to discuss anything about the case.
All right.
Everyone, just whenever you're done.
All right. They're back from lunch.
Right. Stay ready.
Yes, sir, Your Honor.
Fed's ready.
Your Honor, before we bring the jury back in, there's an issue that we need to take out.
All right. I hear you.
Your Honor, just now, the defense received exculpatory evidence from one of the minors, BG's, whose phone had been turned over to law enforcement, and law enforcement downloaded contents of his phone. However, these text messages were not provided to us until BG himself provided them to us earlier today. This was a phone that was taken into custody by Zach Cotton on March 19th. If you look at the state's Bates numbered document 283 is actually his arrest, the search warrant for that phone. Now, while they did provide us text messages from the day of March 19th, they did not provide us any of the other text messages. BG found these text messages on his phone and texted them to myself earlier today. I printed them out on the lunch break, and according to both the United States Supreme Court case law, Brady v. Maryland, Mississippi, King v. State, and also Arizona v. Virginia, which is a U.S. Supreme Court state, the failure of law enforcement to disclose exculpatory evidence is imputed to the state, and such disclosure mandates either a continuance until the defense has had time to review this documentation or dismissal of the charges themselves for the failure to provide exculpatory evidence in discovery.
You want to mark?
Yes, Your Honor, I would like to mark on Friday.
All right. I'll be marked Friday purposes only.
Can we look at it? Yeah, got your copy right here.
I mean, I have a response in general without looking at them.
Hang on. Take a look at them. Where are they marked?
What?
23 ID only.
Your Honor. The date is on the top text message. But the one in general that we believe goes to the exculpatory evidence is on this page. So it would be this page. BG is in blue, Carly is the black.
Where's this do it back? Is that the first text message?
Yes.
All right. So the defendant says, do it back. Mr. Bennett Germany says, I don't know what that is. What's going on? She responds, I don't know. I called Anthony because I wanted to talk to him. And then I saw him and I couldn't breathe. And I couldn't say anything because I didn't know what to say. And I can't remember anything that happened today. I zoned out for most of it and I don't know what's wrong with me. That's what
Yes,
you're
Your
saying
Honor.
is the exculpatory part.
Yes, Your Honor. And that this text thread is dated as of November 22nd of 2023.
All right. Anything further from the defendant?
Not-
By way of motion.
No, Your Honor, just that the U.S. Supreme Court and also the Mississippi State Supreme Court is clear about the failure of the fact that it was in the possession of law enforcement. Law enforcement downloaded the contents of this phone, had it by search warrant and failed to produce it, and that the failure, and according to the U.S. Supreme Court in Arizona v. Youngblood, the failure of law enforcement is imputed to the failure of the state for discovery purposes.
Response by the state, or do you need a few moments?
I'm prepared, Your Honor. First of all, I don't believe
Well,
that text message.
Let's step up to the podium.
Oh,
I may have to go upstairs at some point and get a signed piece of paper from Miss Todd, but I think that I have it here. Your Honor, first let me address the fact that this is not, in fact, exculpatory material. This is a text message between Bennett Germany and the defendant from back in November. Bennett Germany took the stand. He could have provided this at any point. He actually, in fact, spoke to the defense attorneys previously. This is not new information that they had. It's not exculpatory information. However, in order for it to be a Brady violation, the state would, in fact, not have had to produce the material that they had. On June the 4th, 2024, the state of Mississippi provided to the defense attorneys one jump drive containing digital evidence media files, witness interviews of minor friends, the indictment, discovery bait stamps 1 through 349, supplemental discovery bait stamps 350, 351, third Snapchat report 352, 356, 2 CDs labeled Heath Smiley hospital interview and Deputy Allison Day4 body cam, and 1 hard drive containing phone dumps. Your Honor, they were in fact provided the phone extraction from Bennett Germany's phone. It is not the state's fault that they did not review those messages. Everything that was on Bennett's phone that was taken from law enforcement was produced to the defense attorney on June the 4th, 2024. Since there had been issues with the state of Mississippi and the defense attorneys claiming that they had not in fact received items, the state went ahead and had them sign something stating that they had received discovery, and also the entire jump drive, now not the external hard drive, but the jump drive that was provided that had the media and electronic data on it was screenshotted. Ms. Todd signed off on April the 20th, 2024 that she had received all those items, including through bait stamps number 798. When Mr. Camp reached out to me the day before the defense attorneys had provided their expert discovery, I believe it's by email, I can go back and look, Your Honor, I believe responding to him around 5 o'clock, he said something to the effect of, where are the text messages between the kids? And my response was, well, there's 2 places. There's screenshots that you guys were provided, and then there's messages within the actual phone extractions.
Ooh.
Your Honor, they had this material, they knew this material existed, and for them to try to claim now that they were not provided that information is disingenuous. And again, this witness took the stand. If they knew this, if he knew this, if they had this information, they met with him previously, why on earth would they be producing it now? We do not believe this is exculpatory. This is something that happened back in November. We're here because the state has charged Gregg with murdering her mother on March the 19th, 2024. We are here because the state has charged Gregg with attempting to murder her stepfather, Heath Smiley, on March the 19th, 2024. And we are here because the state has charged Carly Gregg with tampering with physical evidence for removing the surveillance footage that captured a portion of the incident and hid it in the refrigerator. There is nothing about this text message that would indicate that it is anything other than messages between the defendant and one of her friends who on the stand said he was her best friend. This has not been authenticated. I don't know, Your Honor, without going and putting the phone extraction into my computer whether or not this message is actually there. But if it is, they've had it since June.
Hold on just a second.
May I respond, Your Honor?
In a second. I'm going to give you a chance to reply. All right. What documentation do you have to prove that you turned this over to the defense? I believe you said there was a jump drive that contained the phone extract, and I'm familiar with phone extractions. That there's no way to extract part of a phone on Celebrite.
That's right, Your Honor.
Okay. So did you show me what you got to prove that you turned over a jump drive?
Nope.
Of course,
And if you need a few minutes to go grab your paperwork, you
I
go.
do not, Judge.
Show it to counsel opposite.
We've had this issue come up previously, so now we have the defense attorney sign saying they picked up material.
All right. Do you have a copy of that we can mark for identification?
This is the
purposes?
only one I have, Your Honor. I can rip it out of the file and make a copy if necessary.
All right. You showed it to counsel opposite, correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. Mark it for identification purposes for the state.
Your Honor, for the record, that bears Miss Todd's signature and date.
Okay. Let's mark it so I can see it.
Yeah, because this could be on an appeal if she's found guilty. The proof that everything she said.
All right. And what you're saying is this jump drive contained digital discovery. Is that correct?
Your Honor, there was a jump drive that the defense brought to our office. That jump drive contained the digital discovery, the physical file, the PDFs, the 2 CDs that we had in our file, as well as we had an external hard drive that had these phone extractions on them. They were put onto the jump drive that Ms. Todd picked up on June the 4th, 2024, as indicated by a hard drive containing phone dumps. Your Honor, there are multiple emails between myself and Ms. Todd that if I need to, I can run upstairs and print off where I've said, let me know if you can't open a file. Let me know if you don't have something. I said, in fact, hey, I screenshotted 800 pages and scanned it in. Let me know if a single file doesn't open. Mr. Camp and Ms. Todd were attached to all those messages. At no point did they ever say, hey, we don't have Bennett's phone extraction. Again, just because they don't know how to access something, they didn't ask our office for something, or they didn't take the time to review that material, Judge, does not put that burden on the state.
Oh,
Is there anything else the state wants to move in for the court to look at?
Your Honor, I'd like an opportunity to go upstairs and print all those emails I've talked about, if that would assist the court in any way.
Sure. Can you do it within 10 minutes?
I believe so.
All right. We'll be in recess 10 minutes.
In fact,
I'm going to give
Mayor,
you a chance to reply, but I want to see her. It's going to go motion, response, reply, I rule, we're done.
This is not a plot that's cleared up, Your Honor.
Nope, not till I see her documents. I want to complete the state's response. That way you can have a reply. We're not going to have a reply, response, or reply. It's going to be motion, response, reply, I rule, and the rest of it's up to the appellate courts. All right, y'all got 10 minutes.
Your Honor, I believe that I could probably just make a copy of all of this, and that would entail my emails back and forth with Ms. Todd regarding discovery. I kept them because I assumed that there at some point would be some sort of argument that we hadn't produced something. But I do not have a copy of this. This is just the one copy I kept for my file.
Well, I saw Mr. McDivitt stand up back there. He can make himself useful and cut down on the jury's time. I think everybody in the courtroom knows I don't have a problem abusing lawyers and their staff. So give him the email, the emails. Mr. McDivitt, you go copy it.
I think that should be everything. I'm gonna make sure
Wow.
that's all of it.
And please bear in mind, I got a jury waiting.
Missing text messages. She's claiming that we gave them everything. Defense says, no, you
Problem is,
didn't.
there's a bunch of staples in there, but I don't know what I got.
She messaged this boy and said she don't know what's wrong with her.
All right. Ms. Gugliano, still don't discuss your testimony with anybody.
Gugliani.
Well, let me ask this. While he's making copies, would there be some objection to us going on ahead and hearing her testimony? I mean, you're asking me to dismiss the charges, basically, Ms. Todd, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, if I don't decide to dismiss the charges, we're going to hear Ms. Gugliano's testimony anyway. So rather than wasting the jury's time, I'm going to bring the jury in, let the jury, let you cross-examine her, let them redirect, and then I can take another break, and maybe copies will be done by then. I'll hear objections to that procedure by the state.
No objection.
Objections to that procedure by the defense.
No.
All right, let's bring in the jury.
Wow.
Ms. Newman, get your notes. Have a seat.
A motion for mistrial because they didn't get text messages from that boy. Between
Everybody
her,
take a deep breath.
between him and Carly. Wow. That was a little action-packed. She said, I kept everything because I had a feeling they were going to say they didn't get something. That's what she said, the prosecuting attorney said. It's like, oh. Oh, man.
Good afternoon, Dr. G.
Good afternoon.
If you recall during your direct examination, Ms. Newman asked you about information you received from me. Is it correct in my understanding that you called me?
Yes.
Okay. And I provided information upon your request?
Yes, you did.
Okay. And during an evaluation, when you're evaluating a minor or any person, who's in control of that evaluation?
I am.
And if you felt for any reason that your evaluation was being hindered, either by something with the location or anything else, what would you do?
I would try to take steps if I could to correct it.
Okay. And Dr. G, you mentioned on direct examination with Ms. Newman that there was an occasion in which I interjected or interrupted during your evaluation of Carly.
Yes.
And was that because there was a time or two in which I was aware that Carly was trying to answer a question for you that she didn't know the answer to?
There were a few times where you interjected to tell Carly not to answer if she didn't know, or to just say she did not know. And then there were times that you interjected to prompt Carly.
Yeah, to make sure you had all the information, correct?
I can't say what your intentions were. I'm just saying
no.
you
Yeah.
prompted her by giving her, a word or something like that, or mentioning, remember this.
Okay. And Dr.
That's leading.
Dr. G, you were originally there to do an evaluation on Carly's competency to stand trial and to determine whether or not she was competent at the time of the incident on March 19th. Is that correct?
Yes, her competence at the time to stand trial and her sanity at the time of the alleged offenses.
Okay. And can you, explain, but in the course of your evaluation, you ended up just evaluating whether or not Carly was competent to stand trial, correct?
That's correct.
And that's very different than whether or not she was actually competent at the time of the incident, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And you have testified for this court once before at a competency hearing. Do you recall that?
In this specific case? Or?
Yes, in this
yes.
case. Yes. And do you recall your testimony in that case that you informed the court that you stopped your evaluation because you became aware that medication might be an issue in Carly's competency at the time on March 19th, and you felt like there was someone else who could evaluate that?
Yes, it was my opinion that it appeared we had started talking as I mentioned before, about what was going on with Miss Gregg in the month leading up to the alleged offenses, and she mentioned her psychiatric medications and how she stopped one medication and started another a week before the alleged offenses, and that she had some reactions to those medications. So I recommended that a psychiatrist, a forensic psychiatrist, do the evaluation because I could not address whether any side effects or withdrawal symptoms may have been present due to medication, since that's not a specialty area of mine.
Thank you. I tender the witness, Your Honor.
Redirect examination.
Well, that. She didn't ask her that many questions, just covering her ass about when she was like interrupting her during her evaluation of Carly. And then the only thing that came out was, I don't know what your intentions were. When you're telling her don't answer that, or say you don't know, or this is, the defense is fumbling the ball. I mean, yeah, maybe that's not her expertise for the drugs, but she even said that when the prosecution had her on for direct. She said it. We already know this. This is, so far, it's a disaster for the defense, people.
Dr. Giuliano, in fact, you did try to question Ms. Gregg about whether or not she abused prescription medication, didn't you?
I did.
And she refused to provide an answer.
She declined to answer the question.
And are you able to go forward with any evaluation about medication when somebody fails to provide you information about it? Their abuse of medication.
If their abuse, no. No, if you're asking specifically about abuse, no, but there are other questions that I would have asked later in the interview about medications if I was evaluating her sanity.
And I believe you shared earlier that you did in fact render an opinion regarding her competency and her ability to recall facts, and that was that she is competent. Is that correct?
Yes, it was my opinion that she was competent to recall facts in relation to being competent to stand trial. I'm not saying how much she may or may not be able to recall of the alleged offenses.
Fair enough.
No further questions, Your Honor.
May this witness be finally excused by the state?
Yes, sir.
By the defense?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, y'all approach. You can stand down.
Thank you.
So now we're waiting for, did the prosecution fumble the ball and not handing over these text messages between Carly and this boy? Where she, from what I did understand, what they were saying is that there was, the judge was reading some of them and saying something to the effect of Carly saying, I don't know what's wrong with me. I can't talk about it, or whatever. And here we go. They're trying to figure this out. And the defense had nothing. The prosecution had this lady on for what, an hour? And the defense had her on for 5 minutes to try to gain some points back for her interrupting them and this kind of stuff. And then when she said, I don't know what your intentions were.
Okay. We have some things that we have to take up outside your presence. And we'll ask you to go ahead, step back to the jury room for just hopefully a few minutes. When I say a few, 20, maybe 30. And
Oh, my goodness.
This is my fault, okay? So I know it's in and out, but nonetheless, just take a breather. Give us about 30. Mark them all as a deposit next to number.
Your Honor, for the record, while we were out, the state went upstairs and grabbed a copy of our external hard drive that had the phone extractions on them. We opened that extraction. It was dated April the 30th. It included Bennett Germany's cell phone. We found the messages that Ms. Todd showed the court are in fact on that external hard drive found within the phone extraction that was turned over to them on June the 4th. Ms. Todd is currently in the process. She initially told me she did not have Cellbrite on that file. I showed her on her jump drive where she had it, and she's currently in the process of opening up Bennett Germany's cell phone extraction that was produced on June the 4th.
Your Honor, I have it open right now if I can respond.
All right. Hold on, time out. Where's the stuff you wanted to mark for ID? Is there any further response from the state?
Well, Your Honor, the fact that the witness took the stand already.
Okay. So let's finish up the response.
Yeah, Your Honor.
Again, motion, response, reply, I rule. Okay?
Yes, sir. Your Honor. They were provided the information. This witness has taken the stand already. He could have been asked anything that they wanted to about these text messages. Their motion was that it was exculpatory and that it wasn't turned over. In fact, it was turned over. Your Honor, that I don't know any other way to say that they have it.
Okay. All right. You see. Reply by the defense.
Yes, Your Honor. If you will recall at our hearing on June 4th of 2023, which I have a transcript of, at that day this court told the defense the state to provide all discovery to the state by 5 o'clock that day. The court then asked me if I, in fact, on page 66 of that transcript, the court says, Ms. Todd, do you have an external hard drive you can turn over to the state? And I said, yes, Your Honor, I do. And it said, you owe that to them by 4 o'clock today. And at that point, Your Honor, I did provide an external hard drive to the state before 4 p.m. that day. The state, I think Catherine was just a little mistaken when she said the state gave me these files in digital on the thumb drive. They weren't on the thumb drive. They were on a hard drive, and on the hard drive it contained specific screenshots from March 19th with Bennett, and then in a different section of it, it contained like a summary on the external hard drive of like sort of looks like this of text messages. They're not in chronological order. There doesn't really even seem to be a date order, but I did type in one of the words from Bennett's text message that I gave you on March 28th, which was zoned out, and it's not pulling anything up.
Your permission to assist her?
Do you know how to use the Cellbrite extraction? Do you know how to use the Cellbrite tool, Ms. Todd?
Yes, Your Honor.
So you've looked for it in the reader.
Yes, in fact, it even says here, select the current words, and when Ms. Newman typed it in on her computer, she typed in zone, and it pulled up that particular text message, but it's not pulling it up on this one.
Your maybe assist her and see if it's in fact on her copy.
Sure.
Looks annoyed. I'm guessing that they're going to prove it was all there, and she is calling for a mistrial because of the text messages.
It's there, Your Honor.
Oh,
Did you find it, Ms. Todd?
Yes, Your Honor, I did provide it.
wow.
So you did in fact receive it.
Wow.
Yes, Your Honor.
Motion for mistrial denied.
All right. Ms. Todd, I'm going to say this. When you accuse a prosecutor of a Brady violation, if she had in fact committed a Brady violation, it should be terminated. That's a very serious allegation.
Wow.
Now, as far as Brady versus Maryland, this is the court's ruling. First, the court finds that the defendant did receive it. As such, there is no Brady violation. Second of all, the first prong is that the state possessed evidence favorable to the defendant, including impeachment evidence. In fact, what I've read in this does contain impeachment evidence, but it impeaches Mr. Bennett Germany and your client. This talks about drug usage back to November of 2023, when their testimony is she didn't begin using drugs in any form till January. Second, that the defendant does not possess the evidence, nor could she obtain it with any reasonable diligence. As this court, in fact, the defendant did have it. And obtaining it with any reasonable diligence, as I recall, Mr. Bennett Germany testified that he was her best friend and that he got on a bike and rode several miles to come see her on the day she said she needed help. I think Mr. Bennett Germany has been more than available to Mr. Gregg. Third prong is that the prosecution suppressed the favorable evidence. In fact, they turned it over. And finally, that had the evidence been disclosed to the defense, a reasonable probability exists that the outcome of the proceedings would have been different. If I'm being frank, this reads more like she has some crush on some boy named Anthony, and there's a talk of a whole bunch of use of taking drugs and sleeping pills. I don't see where that would create a reasonable probability of a different outcome. And finally, the court would note that the state has no duty to search out and discover all possible exculpatory evidence. For those reasons, the motion to dismiss the case for a Brady violation will be denied. All right. I'll give these back to the court reporter. All right, anything further from the state before we bring in the jury?
No, sir.
From the defense?
Yeah, Your Honor.
All right, break it.
Oh my God. That is just insane. That is insane that they did that. And man, when he said this is a serious accusation against the prosecution, oh my God. He said she'd have been terminated. Boom, gone. And then he was saying this would have been, he's saying she had been doing drugs. They're talking about doing drugs way before she claimed she started doing the drugs. Dad, blame. This is, that was big, guys. That was big. I wanted to let that play out. I hadn't seen that, and I thought it's relevant. It is definitely relevant. Guess we can just let it play out until the jury comes in. How deep are we in here? Oh, almost 5 hours. We're doing good. This is a long day. He is not happy. That was just like incompetence.
Get this next witness on the front row, please.
Incompetence on the defense's part, not knowing how to open up files.
Oh, he was already here. I'm sorry.
Man. Just that's insane. Wow. Unbelievable. That was kind of action-packed to me. Yeah, I'm a nerd like that, but that was wow. And him scolding her. Well, she took a shot and failed miserably. That stuff was there. Well, at least the prosecution has some of their crap together. I mean, y'all remember the other day where the defense didn't have the videos ready. The guy hadn't reviewed them. And then the prosecution needed stuff printed out. Oh, he was irritated with that. And then now this. And this case is rapid fire. It's going by very quickly. Very quickly. I guess a lot of cases are. I mean, but this is going quite fast. Where is the jury? Here they are.
All right, thank y'all for bearing with me. I apologize. That was my fault, but I think we're ready to proceed now, okay? State may call its next witness.
State calls Dr. Jason Pickett.
Another doctor? Man, a lot of doctors on today. Nothing but doctors.
Adjust yourself up to the microphone, so I'll speak directly into it. Make sure you speak loud enough that lady on the back row can hear you, okay? Yes, sir. You understand you're down under oath, your answers are sworn answers under penalty of perjury.
I do, Your Honor.
All right, you may proceed.
Dr. Pickett, if you would introduce yourself, please.
Hey, my name is Jason Pickett, Pickett. I am a board-certified psychiatrist. I am a board-certified emergency physician and a board-certified forensic psychiatrist.
So I want to break that down one at a time. Tell us about you are a board-certified psychiatrist, what that means.
That means I did a residency in psychiatry. I did it at the University of Virginia. And I treat patients with mental illness, anxiety, depression, OCD, PTSD. I work at the North Mississippi State Hospital where I see patients who've been committed to the state hospital. Most of my patients have a serious mental illness, which is typically schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, schizoaffective disorder, things like that.
As a emergency medicine physician, can you describe for us what that is?
Yes, as an emergency physician, I work in the emergency department and I treat emergencies. So stroke, heart attack, car wrecks, psychosis, acute, altered mental state. Patients are brought in by police, paramedics, family, so whatever can walk in the front door.
And we heard from Dr. Gugliano earlier about what a forensic psychologist does, but what is it that a forensic psychiatrist does?
So a forensic psychiatrist, we do a lot of the things that a forensic psychologist does, but we also have the expert experience from residency dealing with and prescribing medications. So we're better qualified to consider medications and how they may benefit or harm somebody related to, in a forensic realm, it's related to maybe a crime or competency to stand trial, sanity at the time of their mental state at the time of the offense, and such. So
I want to talk about, kind of back up before you got your certification and talk about if you could give us the benefit of your educational history.
Yes, so I went to Mississippi College and have a bachelor's from there, a master's degree from there. Then I went to the University of Mississippi Medical Center for medical school. Then I stayed at the University of Mississippi Medical Center where I did a 3-year emergency medicine residency, completed that, and immediately after finishing that I went to Virginia and started a second residency in psychiatry. Completed that, worked as an emergency physician throughout that training, periodically here and there as much as I could. And then I did a 1-year fellowship after completing the psychiatry residency in forensic psychiatry where I stayed in Virginia. And that included 2 days a week I would go to the state hospital in Virginia where I would see patients pertaining to competency and sanity. And then 2 days I was at the ILPPP, it's the Institute of Law, Psychiatry and Public Policy, where there's a lot of forensic psychologists and we work on forensic cases together. And then 1 day a week I would go down to the women's prison and see patients there as typically a general psychiatrist, but it's in a correctional setting. So.
And when you're doing this fellowship, you're actually already licensed to practice medicine.
Yeah, to some degree. I have my MD. You get that when you graduate medical school. So I had that throughout my ER residency and my psychiatry residency and my forensic fellowship. And I was moonlighting as an ER doctor while I'm doing the second residency and fellowship just to pay some bills. But so yeah, I was able to practice medicine. throughout all
Wow.
that.
Do you have to take a test or get any kind of certification before you can be a forensic psychiatrist?
Yes, you have to do a 1-year fellowship, which you have to apply for. In the state of Virginia, they only take one applicant a year, and fortunately I was blessed enough to receive that position, which was an honor, and I was very thankful for my training there. Then after completing that, you have to take a board certification, which is expensive and takes a lot of time and money, but I did it and passed, and I'm happy.
And where is it that you're licensed?
We would accept him as I think they're wanting to have him as an expert in general psychiatry, forensic psychiatry, and emergency
Medicine.
medicine. We don't object to that.
All right, he'll be admitted as an expert in the area of general psychiatry, forensic psychiatry, and
They want
emergency
to hurry
medicine.
to jump
You can
and get things
continue
going.
with with your
Interrupted
question
him?
about the witness's qualifications if you wish.
No, sir. No need for that. Dr. Pickett, have you, I do want to ask about this. Prior to being involved in this case, have you had the opportunity to perform mental evaluations of defendants?
Yes. In my fellowship, I had on the forensic unit at the state hospital. By definition, with the forensics, most of them had some kind of criminal or some kind of crime related to their mental health. And so I would evaluate their competency to stand trial to see, do they understand? Do they meet all the qualifications and such? So yes.
And we heard Dr. Gugliano talk about there's a list in the state of Mississippi of forensic either psychologists or psychiatrists that are certified to perform these types of evaluations through the Department of Health. Do you know, are you one of those?
Yes, I am.
And how many forensic psychiatrists are there in the state of Mississippi that have gone through the qualification to perform the mental evaluations through the Department of Health?
I don't know how many have gone through the process, because you do have to apply and go through those credentials. They, in my opinion, would be qualified if they wanted to do the process. I don't know how many did the process, but there's only about, I think, 6 in the state of Mississippi. And as far as forensic psychiatrists go, not all of them are practicing. And many of the forensic psychologists are actually out of state. Some of them are out of state that we have. And the list is not very long.
Wow.
When you are asked to do, in your previous evaluations, when you're asked to determine whether somebody is either mentally competent or insane for trial purposes, who usually hires you, or who are you doing that on behalf of?
To date, I'd say 99% has been the defense. This is my first case being retained for the prosecution. But I do want to make it clear that I remember when we first talked, regardless of whoever brings me into the case, my opinion is my own, and I take great pride and responsibility in that. And regardless of who gets me involved, I let them know from the beginning that my report may fall on your side or it may not, and that's that.
Nice.
And when you were retained by the state, we agreed to that, right?
We did.
That's awesome.
Can you explain, and I know you were present for Dr. Clark's testimony and that you were in the courtroom for Dr. Gugliano's testimony, but I just want to make sure that we're talking about the same insanity standard. Can you describe for the ladies and gentlemen what the McNaughton standard is in the state of Mississippi?
Sure. So the McNaughton standard for insanity, and it does vary from state to state. In Mississippi, it is named after Daniel McNaughton, a guy in 1843 who he thought he was killing the prime minister, and he actually killed like a secretary, and he was found insane. And so at that time they came up with a law, again this was 1843 I believe, where you have to have a threshold mental illness just to consider insanity. If you want to move forward, you have to have at least a mental illness. Once you have that mental illness, that's like your ticket. That's like you cannot pass go without that ticket. So you get that diagnosis, and then we can consider the other prongs of this standard. And for McNaughton, it is, did the individual understand the nature and the quality of what they were doing at the time of the offense? That's one. The next one is, did the individual understand the wrongfulness of what they were doing? And so you may have a mental illness, schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, PTSD, whatever it is, but that does not equal insanity by the McNaughton standard. You have to meet the other prongs.
I want to talk about those prongs, Dr. Pickett. You said to know the nature and quality of the acts you were doing. Can you kind of break that down and explain that for us?
Yeah. So, nature, to understand is, from my understanding, is a relatively low bar. It's a knowledge. You know what you're doing. It's a fact-based knowledge. An appreciation, in my opinion, would be a higher standard of you. I think, as Dr. Gugliano testified to earlier, you would also understand the social implications and the ramifications. It's a higher standard. But in Mississippi, according to the Mississippi Rules 12 of Criminal Procedures, which talks about the standard and such, there's simply an understanding. Did this individual know what they were doing? Did they understand the nature? For example, understanding the nature. Let's say somebody is really psychotic, they are out of their mind, they are squeezing a lemon, or they think they're squeezing a lemon, and they're squeezing, and then in reality, instead of squeezing a lemon, they're choking somebody to death. They would not in that instance understand or have an appreciation or an understanding of the nature and quality of what they're doing. They think they're squeezing a lemon, when in reality they're choking somebody to death. Or, so that's basically that.
And as far as the second part of that prong, did they know right from wrong? Did they know wrongfulness? I think we all kind of are taught as children right from wrong, but can you describe for us in a legal sense what that means?
Yeah, so in Mississippi, the second prong is, did they know, have an understanding of the wrongfulness of their acts? And in Mississippi, it's a legal wrongfulness, just simply knowing that it's illegal, not even necessarily morally wrong. In other states, it's a moral, like, yes, I know it's illegal to do that, but it might not be morally wrong. I have to, let's say, yes, I know murder is illegal, but I have to kill this alien to save America. So they wouldn't understand the nature because they're psychotic and delusional, and they wouldn't understand the wrongfulness morally because they think it's an alien and they have to kill this alien to save America. So morally they might not think that was wrong in that example. But in the state of Mississippi, it's simply a knowing legally that it is wrong.
And so just to clarify, even if they didn't morally know it was wrong to kill that alien, they thought it was an alien, in Mississippi, you still don't get to insanity.
Correct.
In this particular case, who was the defendant?
Miss Carly Madison Gregg.
And did you have the opportunity to interview Miss Carly Madison Gregg?
I did.
What other information? Let me take a step back, Dr. Pickett. I apologize. Did you perform an evaluation and prepare a report in this case?
I did.
And did you render opinions regarding Carly Madison Gregg in that report?
I did. I met with Miss Carly Gregg on August 30th for about 4.5 hours here with Attorney Todd, and I rendered a decision that was based on my interview with Carly, my extensive review of a lot of discovery, my training, education, experience, and knowledge. I pulled on all of that to surmise a opinion.
And was that opinion to a reasonable degree of medical certainty?
Yes, it was.
And the items that you're talking about that you reviewed, the interview with the defendant, the mountain of discovery,
Mountain.
talks with my office. Did you also talk with Miss Todd?
Yes, to some degree. I talked to her, I think, mostly during the evaluation and occasionally via email correspondence.
In relying on those things, is that something that a similar situated forensic psychiatrist would rely upon in rendering his opinions?
Yes.
So I want to talk to you about, well, I want to talk to you first. Let's talk about what your opinion is regarding Carly Gregg's sanity, and then I want to back up to how we got there.
Okay.
So what was your ultimate opinion as to whether or not Carly Gregg was insane at the time of the murder, attempted murder, and tampering with physical evidence on March the 19th, 2024?
I'm happy to discuss my opinion, but I do want to say the ultimate opinion is for the fact finders to decide, and I would just offer my opinion. So I do not want to speak to the ultimate decision, but I just want to lay out my opinion based on everything that I have researched and written and read and done. So my opinion is that Carly does not meet Mississippi's standard for insanity at the time of the offense, and that she knew the nature, quality, and wrongfulness of her actions during that day.
Ouch.
So, Dr. Pickett, I want to take you back to the things that you reviewed. You talked about...
Hold up a second. This is huge. This guy, if you're sitting on the jury, this guy is well likable, well spoken. And he seems like he has some religious beliefs. He says he feels blessed. He's coming across as genuine, honest. I mean, perception is everything. Perception is everything. And just to reiterate, when they were going over his credentials, which was phenomenal, by the way. I mean, this guy has worked his ass off. He is working in emergency rooms as a medical doctor, and he's doing psychology, forensics, all of this stuff. And it struck me odd is that the defense pops in and says, "Okay, we'll go ahead and we're good with him." Like they stopped him during his credentials, which I didn't think bode well. Why did they do that? To just move on? I don't know. That was kind of odd. What do you think? I mean, he thought, "Oh no, yeah. We'll agree that he's qualified." And then him coming out just like the other lady, Mrs. G. We'll call her Miss G. Amanda G., where she was on, and she says, "Hey, I let everybody know whatever my findings are. I'm not to favor somebody. I'm to take the information, and I am to just wherever the chips may fall, where my conclusion is. Like, I'm not going to just come out and favor somebody. So that, and then he just said that too. And he's saying, no, she does not meet the criteria of Mississippi standards, that she was insane at the time of the crime. Guys, to me, that is huge. Him saying that. And like I said, he is already likable. He seems like a humble man. And he doesn't have a dog in the hunt. He is just doing his job of what he is asked to do. That is the perception I am getting from him. Let's continue, because wow, that's big.
A mountain of discovery.
A mountain.
We've seen in the courtroom, we've seen some videos from that day. Did you have the opportunity to review those?
Yes, I did.
Did you consider those in rendering your opinion?
Yes. When you say those, I've seen the garage video footage. I've seen the Wise video camera footage from the dining room. I've seen body camera from the officers. I reviewed several of those. So I have seen a lot of video.
Wow.
I want to take you back to your interview of Carly Gregg. When did you say that happened?
August 30th of 2024.
And who was present during that interview?
Me, Attorney Todd, and Miss Carly Gregg.
In your practice, is it common for a attorney or a defense attorney to be present during your evaluation?
It's not common. Most of the time I do my evaluations for the defense, and so most of the time they don't come, and they know that I'm there most of the time. But no, they can be there. It's not standard that they are, but they can, and it's not a problem if they are.
In this particular case, in your report, you noted that Ms. Todd was present, but there was something that stood out to you about the participation in this evaluation. Can you tell the ladies and gentlemen about that?
Yes. So at the beginning of the evaluation, Attorney Todd told me that, hey, there's some things that Carly doesn't like to talk about, so I will have to prompt her. And I told her, that's fine, especially in adolescence and a 15-year-old. When I see patients outside here, parents are often involved. That's not unheard of. They have to prompt them. That's totally okay. As the evaluation went on, though, it seemed to be significantly more than just simple prompting. It seemed to become very leading questions, close-ended questions, interjecting particular things and redirecting the conversation at specific times. And in my report, which is 85 pages, I do list examples of this, and I can go through that if that's desired. But it did seem excessive, and it seemed like I was being led somewhere in some of the examples.
I had mentioned in the last video that when Amber G was on and she was saying some things, I did make the comment that those sounded like they were leading questions, not just prompting her to say, okay, well, she doesn't really want to talk about that. And he's okay. Or Ms. G said that she didn't ask her certain questions because of the legality of it, asking her questions about the day of the incident, which I wanted her to. Why are you not asking her that? Did she remember? I mean, if she's claiming she blacked out, then why wouldn't you just ask her, do you remember? Carly could say, no, everything's a blur. But she wasn't asking her questions about that, but I did make that comment because it sounded like Miss Todd was leading her. And this guy, 85 pages? And he said he marked it every time. This is either Miss Todd, I'm going to say this because this is getting good. This guy is smart. He knows if somebody's trying to pull the wool over him, I guess. I'm going to use layman terms because I'm lame. I'm just an average schmo. But he knows. He's picking up on this attorney directing the interview, and then he's not going to spot it. I guess she's going to know now in the future if she gets in this situation again. Can you outsmart a forensic therapist, a forensic guy who specializes in behavior, especially in criminal situations? This is fascinating. Fascinating stuff. Fascinating. Ooh, let's get back to this because, oh man, this is getting good.
And what was your opinion as to why you were being led?
I I really don't want to speculate as to why a defense attorney might, interject so much. It did seem calculated to me, and like there may be some secondary gain in trying to fool me into believing something.
Oh my God.
In my experience, most of the time when patients are experiencing these things, they do not really need a lot of prompting. Most of the time, if they're suffering with severe mental illness, auditory hallucinations, these scary dissociative spells, they will volunteer that information usually and be able to tell me very vividly and without prompting what they're suffering with.
And just to be clear, Dr. Pickett, it was not your intention to pick on Attorney Todd, right?
No.
You simply noted that in your report because you found it unusual.
Yes.
Wow.
I want to talk to you about, during your evaluation and your review.
Wait. Now, look at her. She is taking notes. She is, oh my God, y'all. She's going to come back. She gets to cross-examine him. Whoa. This is going to get crazy. What is she going to say? Well, obviously he's going to go, I don't know what your intentions are, because she asked the Dr. G, Amber G. Well, when I said this, I said that wasn't my intention. She goes, I don't know what your intentions were. I can't read your mind. Y'all recall that? Dad, blame. So, where's this going to go? How is she going to cross-examine this guy? Actually, he's saying she's leading her. Patients with disorders don't need prompting. They're going to come out and go, man, I'm here, because they're crazy. Wow. This is getting so good. Oh my God, this is like the best part. I mean, right now, I'm a little giddy because good Lord, this is huge. Man, this has been the best so far out of all of it, out of all the testimony right now, this very moment.
Of the discovery materials, did you ever find any evidence of drug use by Carly?
Yes. There's a lot of mention from her friends, and which, I try not to put too much weight into that because that can be hearsay, opinion, text messages here and there about substances, but there was a lot of it, which made me think there could be more involved here with substances. And it seems like that was the trigger or the impetus for the conversation on the 19th between her and her mother. So I do think substance abuse is relevant.
Did you also review the results of a drug screen of Miss Gregg?
I did.
Could you tell us what a little bit about that?
Yes. I want to know that.
There was a drug screen that was obtained, I believe, at the juvenile center after she was detained, and it tested positive for cannabinoids.
What
Did
is
you
that?
have the opportunity to review the Vital Core records also?
I got some records from Region 8 afterwards. I did not get the vital records afterwards. Only it may have been in discovery, but by that time I think I had already written my report, and what was in the records, medical records, mental health records after the fact, to me is highly skeptical. And so I don't necessarily put a lot of weight on what was said after the fact, given the very large suspected secondary gain.
Dr. Pickett, if there were another drug screen in the Vital Core records.
Wait a second. That is huge. Now remember, if anybody's watching me cover this, I had been saying that the nurse practitioner and the therapist, all of them, Carly had said nothing about blackouts and about voices. Didn't hear anything from the stepdad. And here comes Dr. Clark. After the murder, all of a sudden we're finding out she's hearing voices since she was 6. She's having blackouts. She's having missed time. All of this stuff. And I was always questioning it. I was always questioning it. We don't have anything pre-murder, but we have all this stuff after. And he's saying he's not putting stock in what is the after. The jury is hearing this, and I hope they're paying attention. And I'm sure they are, because Deb blamed, that just shot right out at me. Just that right there. He's saying, I'm not putting much stock into that. Now, we're finally getting to the toxicology, because I've been wanting to know that this whole time. I wish they just hadn't brought it up, but here we go.
That showed the presence of marijuana. What would that indicate to you?
It would indicate that she had used marijuana at some point in the recent history of that drug test.
What are the levels?
I want to talk to you about some of the other things, Dr. Pickett, that you relied on in your evaluation of Carly Gregg. May I approach the witness room?
Yes. Show it to counsel officer.
Yeah, I want to know what. And what are these camarados? I don't know what that is. I'm ignorant. Well, what's the THC levels? Now, remember, they were saying that high THC can cause hallucinations.
I'm handing you what's previously been marked as Defendant's Exhibit 11, and it does not appear these pages are numbered, so I just kind of want to go through them in order.
Okay.
The camera's freezing up. It's not on my part.
Does that look like something that you reviewed previously?
Yes.
If you could, tell the ladies and gentlemen, what's on the very first page of one of the journals and or sketchbooks or scratch pads for Ms. Gregg's room?
It says water, fire, earth, air. Water, fire, earth, air. Water, fire, earth, air. Fire is circled, and it says, I choose fire. It is powerful, beautiful, and deadly. These are the traits I desire, so I choose fire! Exclamation mark.
And did you consider that whenever you were rendering your ultimate opinion?
I take everything into consideration that I have, that I can. When I look at this in these journals, there's a lot of things in these journals. And I took the time to look through them, and some of them are concerning. Some of them I question the truthfulness of it. Is it more theatrical? Is it truthful? I think it's hard to know, but I try to use my judgment as I'm reading it in the context. This one seems to me that she writes down in her journal that she desires powerful, beautiful, and deadly.
What were some of the other journal entries that stood out to you, Dr. Pickett?
Can I look at my report, please?
Sure.
Okay. So one of the journals, I think this is the Brown Journal, it says in the beginning...
If he's going to refer back, can you just tell us what page he's referring to?
This would be, this says entry January, it would be the first, I think it's the first one on January 2023, 2024, the Brown.
Yeah, if you can tell me what page.
He needs the page.
You didn't base it.
They're not bait stamped. That's what I said. It's hard to tell because they're not bait stamped.
Yeah, I think weren't you saying you were-
Approach. Y'all approach.
Oh. Oh, man. Guys, this is devastating. This guy on the stand and the prosecution's questioning.
Page 20. He's on page 20 of his report.
It is devastating.
Regarding Carly's journal.
Dang. And they know it. This
If you
is
would proceed,
bad.
Dr. Pickett.
Okay, thank you. So it says in the first entry of this journal, I know one of y'all is going to read this eventually, which I guess I have no control over. So to me, the very first entry of this journal, she acknowledges that there's going to be an audience. Somebody's going to read this journal, and she suggests that she has no control over that. And so as I think about that, I ask myself, is this a personal journal where somebody puts things that they are really trying to keep secret? Or is this a budding, articulate author that describes things for theatrical reasons? And so as I go on, there's other things that make me say that. For instance, she talks about various movie reviews. One of them was Pinocchio, the still life. It's a new one that came out, and she talks about her favorite scenes were when the bomb was dropped on the church that killed Carlo. Mussolini, and Mussolini, he's like, he was an imperialist that was associated with Hitler, believed in xenophobia and imperialism, and so I believe signed a pact with Hitler at some point. And so her favorite parts of the movie were the war crimes, Carlo getting killed, and then there's other things where she talks about Harley Quinn, which is some of this stuff is childish, but it shows us into her mind. And so she's right, Harley Quinn is the Joker's girlfriend, and she's crazed and psychotic and does these violent crimes. Then one instance in her journal, there's a little pin mark where she says, it looks like you just poked the paper. And then she writes beside it, look what I did right here. I stabbed my journal like it was Tom Riddle's. Tom Riddle is from Harry Potter series, and he turns into Lord Voldemort, and he's evil. And so in her journal, she talked about Harley Quinn, war crimes, Tom Riddle. There was another page where I can find where she says, what do I believe? And she writes these tenets down, and one of them says, it's okay to be evil. There is no God. And if I can have a minute, can find others.
Judge, may I approach?
Holy smokes. Y'all know in past child killers who like maybe gone into the school, they'd have manifestos and they'd have all this documentation of their journals or whatever they have, more like a manifesto. But there was a pattern of aggression towards either other students. Now, in her case, obviously it's her mother. But we haven't seen evidence in her journal that she wanted to kill her mother, but she is alluding to evil's okay. Her favorite scenes were people being blown up. This kind of stuff. And, oh my God, this is terrible. This is terrible for the defense. And how are they going to poke holes in this? Wow. This is crazy. But good. My goodness. Look, she looks mad.
Yeah.
Look at her. And knowing somebody would read it? Well, now, I guess the defense could say, I just thought of this. So she states that, is this private? Knowing somebody could read this. So in knowing that, how much is just drama? okay, I'm giving the benefit of the doubt. Let's just say, because I'm not a doctor, but I'm just saying, what is defense going to do? Well, she could just be doing this. How much is it? Like he said, how much is it just being dramatic? Or is this her really, this is her true thoughts on how she thinks? If her parents are coming in and she knows her parents are reading her journals, I don't know, just pointing that out. Like, how much is it for real? Or is she just writing all this crap to think she's making a movie? She likes Harley Quinn. I mean, I like Harley Quinn as a character in a comic book or in a movie, but not somebody to look up to, right? So this is a twisted mind kind of thing, I guess. I don't know. I'm just yapping.
Thank you. So this one in the journal also, what do I believe? There is no God. Heaven and hell are fake. Love is important. You don't need family. Writing your own destiny with a check mark beside it. Loving yourself. Having friends is important. Don't belong to anything. Never be alone. Go to your place of comfort often. Sometimes you must blend in, but never forget it's okay to be evil. Sometimes you must jump into the dark to truly see the light. Privacy is not loneliness. Death is inevitable.
What does that mean? She's crazy.
Were there other portions of the journal that you found concerning?
Another part where she talks about her reported auditory hallucinations. She says on March 12th, 2024, this is on page 21 in my report, she mentions enjoying books about crazy people, and then she adds that she had a psychotic break, but calls the incident quite silly. And she goes on to say, I actually spoke with one of the voices in my head. Well, I didn't hear them until earlier today, but only then. My particular friends and I were practically screaming bloodthirstily and ravenously. Thank God physical confrontation was not fruitively possible. I sound crazy. And then she continues on. In other sections of her journal, she talks about all the dishonesty.
The dishonesty with what, Dr. Pickett?
I believe she was referencing to after the iPod that she was using as a burner phone had been found in early January, she wrote in her journal at some point, I'm kind of relieved. Thanks, because of all the dishonesty. I'm glad it's just over with, so to speak, was my impression. So there were a lot of things. Yes, sir. There were also text messages that I had seen between her and friends that were concerning. When I'm trying to understand somebody's psychiatric mental state, all of this is important. Text messages with friends, conversations with friends, parents, what's going on at school, what's going on at home, drug use, medical history, psychiatric history, all of this is important. And so there's a lot of detail here. And so as I was looking through text messages, one of them she says to, this is on page 22, she's talking to Thad on February 7th, 2024. And she says, you don't understand how fucking psycho I was that day. I almost murdered my parents. And so as I am preparing to come and evaluate her, given the context of what's going on, I take extreme time to go through the mountain of text messages between teenagers, diaries, journals. Some of it seems theatrical, and to almost entertain a would-be reader, and some of it is very concerning.
Yes, that's what.
Dr. Pickett, were there also some, I want to come back to the text messages in just a minute, were there also some notes that you looked at of Carly's about gaslighting?
There was a folder that was found, and it goes into a lot of detail about emotional manipulation and gaslighting. And it says at the top, emotional manipulation, gaslighting, and it would define kind of what that is and the setup and how you set this up, how you do it, and then, you know, at the end of it, it signs off with a valediction that says, take advantage, happy hurting.
There were also, I guess, what had been labeled as a dream journal. Do you remember looking through anything where she described some of her dreams?
I do remember one of her writings where she talks about her dreams and kind of leaves the reader with like a cliffhanger of, I had something along the lines, I'm paraphrasing, of, I had a really good dream last night. I hope I have another one tonight. Should I write my dreams down? In other words, to like share them with whoever might read it in the future.
Do you recall also seeing Dr. Pickett something where she said back in April in one of her notebooks, I have depression and anger issues, but no one gives a shit?
Yeah, I think she used the word rage.
And before I move on, I think there was another one. There was actually something that was produced in Discovery, and you were present when Dr. Clark testified. It was like a piece of paper that was in green, like a green marker handwriting. As your understanding, and from the testimony yesterday from Dr. Clark, that Carly denied ever writing that or knowing who wrote that. Is that right?
I don't know that I asked her specifically about that page during our evaluation.
Have you reviewed his report?
I have.
And he asked her about that.
He did?
And then,
I believe he did.
when you were present when he testified yesterday
Yes.
about that?
Yes.
What
I
did
wonder why he
Carly
didn't cover
say in one
Ask
of her journals or notebooks about innocence?
There was a quote in one of the areas that said, let me see if I can find it. I think I'm on page 46. It says, life's greatest illusion, innocence.
So, Dr.
Wow.
Pickett, you talked about some of the text messages that you reviewed. Were those messages from the day of the incident, March the 19th, 2024?
Yes. Some of them were. I reviewed text messages for a long time, various people, but yes, I did review text messages from the time, very close to the time of the offense.
So I want to walk you through that. So the messages that you reviewed, can you kind of tell the ladies and gentlemen about why that was important in rendering your ultimate opinion?
Yes. So the text messages at the time of the offense are a window into her mind at that time. And having her words that close to the time of the offense is a pretty good window into her mind and what she was thinking and how she was doing at that time, in my opinion.
Whoa.
And I asked Dr. Gugliano, I believe you're present in the courtroom, it's not very common that we actually have like medical records from a defendant the day before they commit a violent crime, is it?
in experience, I'll have medical records related to somebody who's had a crime, but having somebody do a exam the day before is pretty unusual, rare, not the typical norm. If I have that, I'm very thankful for it.
Whoa.
I want to talk, when we get to your what you relied upon on the day of the incident, I want to talk a little bit more about the text messages and things too. I want to call your attention to something in your report where you talked about that Carly's responses seemed almost textbook perfect. Tell us what you meant by that.
Ooh.
Well, when I would ask her to tell me about some of her reported dissociative spells, she would give me the cliche answer of, well, I just felt like I was outside my body, like I was right here. She kind of did that hand motion like that and said, it's like a dream, like I was just watching myself. And that was another example was when we were talking about racing thoughts. I asked her can you elaborate on that? Tell me more about your racing thoughts. I think she said it's like the ocean. And sometimes from experience, people who may not actually have a diagnosis will have trouble going beyond the simple textbook cliche answers. Whereas when I see people who legitimately suffer from schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, or even I've seen a few rare that actually had a dissociative disorder. It is rare. They usually can vividly describe these things to me, and oftentimes I see them objectively. They can't hide it. Sometimes they don't even have insight into it. And when somebody comes to me to the state hospital, I mean, it's hard to give a impression of racing thoughts, but these patients, they go from 0 to 100 and their thoughts are one after another, boom, 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 boom. And they may or may not connect, and their pressured speech, it's hard to get them to stop. It's very obvious when they're to that degree. If they're psychotic, it's even more obvious. In my opinion, you don't have to be a psychiatrist to recognize some of these things. Their cousin or their mother or their brother will say, Johnny's not doing good, doc, and they'll drop him off in the ER or they'll drop him off at the state hospital. Well, they'll get committed and come to the state hospital, but it'll be very obvious.
Wow. This is so damning. This is so damning. I thought I unplugged something, so I had to go look. Textbook responses. Do we think Carly researched that? I don't know. Nobody's brought up yet. I would assume that if she had a laptop, she had a phone, if she got a computer, had she researched psycho stuff? Or is this coached from Miss Todd? So he says, give me a description of racing thoughts, and she said, ocean. Now, like I said, I have family members that have schizophrenia. And yes, you can tell. Like he's saying, like if a family member says, yeah, so-and-so's not doing good today. They know, they can't hide it. Somebody who is literally has legitimate psychosis of whatever it is, it's apparent. Now, I did say in another video that a family member could hide while he was in court being asked questions by the judge. My mother told me, because she had to take him to court, that he wasn't acting crazy and he knew what to do and what to say, But this guy is a professional. So when he's asking people pinpoint questions, and I don't think my family member was smart enough to know to try to trick a psychiatrist, because obviously he was found to be schizophrenic by a professional doctor. Because maybe you can fool other people to some extent, but when a professional is examining you and they're going through a litany of questions and they see they know you can't trick them. Not a professional. This is like, wow. The defense is destroyed. Destroyed. She is giving textbook answers to his questions. And this guy, from his background, he's talked to a lot of, now he didn't say crazy people, I am, but he's saying a lot of people with mental problems. And he's saying she didn't meet the standard that she's to be insane at the time of the crime. Man, let's go. My gosh. This is amazing.
Dr. Pickett, at some point in your report, you talked about the DSM-5 TR. And we heard Dr. Clark talk a little bit about the DSM-5 yesterday. Can you tell us what the difference in the 5 and the TR is?
Every few years, the American Psychiatric Association councils get together and revise, do a text revision, so they update the DSM-5 criteria with various things and criteria. And so every few years there'll be a new revision come out, and the DSM-5 TR is the latest version and the one that I depended on while I rendered my opinion.
Part of your report talks about Carly's thought process, that it was linear, logical, I think reality-based and goal-directed. Could you explain to us what you mean by that?
So linear, so as a psychiatrist, our physical exam is a lot of observation. Kind of start at the head, eye contact, their blink rate, are they
She blinks a
their
lot.
speech rate, their speech content. We get into their thought content, their thought process. Is it linear, A, B, C, D? Ideas seem to connect, or is it, very disorganized and they don't connect? And so linear means we're having a conversation, it's going from A to B, and they connect. Logical means it's reasonable and it's real. It makes sense. You understand. Reality based it's not delusional. So somebody that I see at the state hospital who's psychotic, they may come in with delusions and they'll say, the FBI's after me, and I know it because I saw a gas can at the gas station and I knew that gas can was a sign that the FBI's following me. Or they'll come in and they'll talk about revelations and the black horses and the white horses and the orange horses and the 6-point stars. I mean, it is very disorganized. It's hard to give you an example, but when you see
I
it,
can relate to that.
it's pretty obvious.
The
We've
family
heard
member did that.
testimony, Dr. Clark described a manic state and a hypomanic state. During the course of your evaluation with Carly, did it ever appear that she was having any sort of manic state?
Not during my exam, certainly not.
In your review of the medical records, did it ever appear that Carly had reported any type of manic state?
No. I reviewed, I think the therapy notes started with Annette Bryant back in 2015. At least those were the oldest that I had to look at. I looked through those, did not see any mention of dissociation, no mention of auditory hallucinations, no mention of mania or hypomania. So that was from 2015 to 2019. Then I reviewed the LPC Kirk, the counselor, her charts from January of 2024 through March of 2024, the day before the event, there was no mention of auditory hallucinations, dissociative spells, hypomania or mania, or disorganized thoughts, or anything consistent with psychosis. And then I reviewed the mental health nurse practitioner Lieber. I read all of her notes, January, February, March, and none of those mentioned it either. I also found some medical records from UMMC. I think she would have been about 11 years old. There's a Dr. Vaughn and another doctor. Those were well child visits, but a lot of times, commonly, if a general practitioner recognizes that somebody has bipolar or schizophrenia or whatever, they'll put it in there, and I didn't see anything in those either.
I want to come back to the talk about disassociation, but I want to talk a little bit about Dr. Clark said that Mr. Gregg, Carly's dad, had been diagnosed with bipolar. Did you see medical records that had him listed as a diagnosis of bipolar?
I saw very sparse records that listed him as bipolar.
Based on your training and experience, if someone also suffers from a substance abuse addiction, would it be hard to diagnose them as being bipolar?
It is hard. It's not impossible. But can I elaborate about his notes? So I reviewed and I asked for any records, any psychological records pertaining to Mr. Gregg's mental health. And the only thing I got were the 3 records from Dr. Hardy. And there was some mention of his bipolar disorder in some of the therapy notes, like I believe LPC Kirk's, but that was secondhand. That had been given to her from Ashley. The only ones I could see to confirm, supposedly confirm, is from a Dr. Hardy. And so as an emergency doctor, as a psychiatrist, anytime a patient is brought to me, whether they're in the ER or whether they're in the state hospital, I do my best to go back and review these diagnoses, because I do not like to just simply accept them, because it is common for people to be misdiagnosed with some mental illnesses, especially if they abuse substances heavily, which, according to my review, Mr. Kevin Gregg was well known for his substance abuse, and for many years, and I talk about that in my report if you want me to go into that.
Sure.
So, let me see if I can.
So the drugs made him crazy, not his. Like, are they trying to say that she
I
could
started
inherit
from the
from
beginning.
him?
There's tweets from Mr. Kevin Gregg that start in 2012. Oh, 15. So there's tweets from Mr. Kevin Gregg on March 6, 2012. DMT, psilocybin, lysergic acid, diethylamide 25. That's LSD.
Dang.
Mescaline, which comes from the peyote cactus, I believe. It's a hallucinogen. MDMA, which is ecstasy. Good when used responsibly. Salvia, opium, coca, which are like plant natural things that you can make opium and cocaine out of. Good naturals. He says that in 2012. And then he continues on. I mean, there's like 50 or almost 50 tweets. He tweets at Obama, legalize marijuana. You're ignoring this huge campaign because there's no funding. Bomb the Middle East with cannabis. They'll think they'll want to fight or eat. And he goes on. Ashley, in her journal that I read, it has 334 entries in it, approximately, that I read through.
Oh. So he's going to bring up Ashley's journal? This guy. I'll tell you what, if somebody does have, let's say they have schizophrenia, they were a disgruntled kid, but it got worse when they got older. But if they're doing these hallucinating drugs, it makes it worse. Because my family member did that too. They did the PCP crap Now, look, this was late 70s when this happened in my family. A lot of people were doing acid, all of that stuff. Usually you're just hearing about what? Crack and meth and fentanyl. Today, those it seems to be the drugs of choices I am seeing. But these other drugs, PCP, LSD, acid, all of that stuff, that I don't know. I don't think they're really doing a lot of those now. They've got more heinous drugs, even they're worse than that, making these people zombies. Y'all seen those videos of people on the streets of Philadelphia? It's just very sad and heartbreaking. But the drugs could make things worse, or the drugs alter your brain. And plus, if he's been doing them for years, he's not going to ever be normal.
Ashley, she wrote in her journal of 334 entries a lot about her problem issues with Kevin. And she basically described him as, to paraphrase, abused a lot of drugs, had a lot of mood lability, up and down, substances, and he was an awful father to Carly. He was verbally, emotionally, and even occasionally physically abusive to Carly and Ashley. I believe there's one incident she talks about in there where Carly had a black eye from her, and it was assumed it was from Kevin. Kevin's parents had mentioned his temper and were real kind of awkward around her after the incident related to it. But it goes on to talk about Kevin wants pain medicines. Janet will get pain medicine and give it to him. It just goes on and on and on about that.
I want to talk a little bit about bipolar because it's my understanding that that's one of the diagnoses that Dr. Clark gave to Carly Gregg. Can you talk about whether or not you believe that Carly Gregg actually has either bipolar 1 or bipolar 2?
Okay. Yes, I can. Can I finish my thought about
yes,
the dad, Kevin?
Yes,
There's
yes.
one more important thing, and I'll drop that. When I was talking to Carly during the evaluation about her biological father, Kevin Gregg, I mentioned benzodiazepines. I was talking about drug use did she have? Can we talk about that? And I mentioned benzodiazepines, and she said she knows what benzodiazepines are. And I said, okay. And she explained, I know what benzos are. My dad took them. My dad had this drug cabinet. It was this cabinet full of drugs, like he had prescription pills from like everybody. Again, then I went on, I said, and I'm on page 12. I said, talking about LSD and hallucinogens and mushrooms, I brought those up. She said, again, that's my dad. He took all of that, but I did not. He once bragged to me about taking 10 caps of dried mushrooms, which apparently is a lot because most people only take 2, I think, because that's what he once told me. And so it was emphasized from everybody, Ashley's journal, Carly, and then as I was even watching the body cam footage, I think it's of Deputy Zetterholm, some of the other family, Ashley's parents, I think Bob and Vicky, were there talking to the office of the deputy and had mentioned Kevin and started talking about some of his drug use. I think he mentioned marijuana in the video. And so it seemed by all accounts, going back as far as 2012, with his tweets saying this stuff, family describing him as this, and Ashley even mentioned that he would get Janet to give him pills. To me, it made the diagnosis very skeptical of Mr. Gregg to have bipolar disorder. The very limited and sparse records from Dr. Hardy made it very questionable. And then lastly, Dr. Hardy, who supposedly are the records that support this diagnosis, saw him 3 times, totaling 1 hour, and he ultimately prescribed along with other things, Adderall, Ambien, and Klonopin, which are 3 highly addictive, highly abused neurostimulator and neurosedatives to a person that, by all accounts, everybody knows him as somebody who habitually uses drugs. And to me, prescribing 3 controlled substances to a known person who uses drugs is not what a responsible physician would do if they knew the truth about an individual's substance abuse. And lastly, if you have bipolar disorder, I would hesitate to put you on Adderall, because if anything's going to push you into maybe a manic state or a hypomanic state in bipolar 2, Adderall is a lot more likely to do it than an SSRI.
Wow.
So I want to talk to you about
That was heavy.
The bipolar diagnosis, and then we'll come back to a SSRI, which nurse practitioner Lieber told us a little bit about.
So maybe this is discrediting that Carly hereditary gets the bipolar, because she's claiming she's insane, she's got schizophrenia, she's hearing voices, she's bipolar. That right there is just completely discrediting that Carly could have inherited it from him. But her mom said she took Prozac and it made her have suicidal thoughts. So apparently her mother had some bouts with depression. I'm thinking it was just depression on her mother's part, not bipolar. So this is, to me, it's a big win for the prosecution and dismantling the defense's case.
This morning. So the bipolar, Dr. Clark testified that Carly had these desolate, I believe, I don't recall his exact word for using that, but very specific times of mania, kind of discrete, thank you. Some ups and downs, discrete periods of ups and downs. In the medical world, what does that mean?
So the DSM-5-TR, specific criteria for bipolar disorder. What makes that? We all have a mood. Let's say this is neutral. And there's a zone that is considered normal variation, where we can go up, we can have a good day, we can have a bad day. We can have a good day, we can have a bad day. People with depression, unipolar, that's one pole. Bipolar means there's 2 poles. They're opposite ends. Unipolar depression, they have the downs, and it goes below that normal area, way down here, where they start to have depressed mood, loss of interest. We call it anhedonia. They don't enjoy the things they used to enjoy. Maybe feelings of guilt, hopelessness, worthlessness, concentration difficulties, appetite issues, psychomotor slowing, which is like a sloth. Like they don't want to get out of bed. They don't go shower. They don't bathe. They don't brush their teeth. They're so depressed. They don't cut their toenails. I could tell you some stories. Or they go the other end. They're manic and they have too much energy. They are restless. They have pressured thoughts. Their thoughts are racing. They may start one task, but they can't finish it. They may be very easily distractible. Little noises, things will distract them. They may have a grandiose view of themselves. They may have flight of ideas, so their ideas are bouncing all around. It's really hard for them to go A, B, C, D, E. There can be activity increase where they don't want to sit still. They're restless. They're moving around. There can be sleep disturbances, and there can be very talkative, pressured speech. And so those are the differences. You have the unipolar depression, you're down here, or in bipolar, you not only have the depressive periods, but you have the manic periods. In bipolar 1, you have mania. It's the most severe form. It can be so severe that you even develop psychotic symptoms. So you're so manic, pressured speech, racing thoughts, restlessness, not sleeping, And interestingly, these patients who don't sleep, they feel great. They may have only gotten 1 or 2 hours of sleep last night, but they feel really good. They're not tired after that. And so you oscillate between these two periods. For bipolar 1, mania, really high, it's 7 days of a persistently elevated mood. All day, every day, to the point that it interferes with you socially, occupationally, or interpersonally. It is obvious to people around you, and it is causing significant troubles for you, one way or another. But you feel great. You're not sleeping, racing thoughts, pressured speech. That's 7 days for bipolar 1. Then you go down, you will oscillate. Eventually you'll come down, and you may be depressed for 2 weeks or 2 months. It doesn't know. And then you'll come back at some point, and you'll have another manic episode, and you'll go up and down, up and down. That's bipolar 1. Bipolar 2 is called hypomania. It's a little less than mania. I've seen patients and treated patients who have this, and they can live pretty functional lives. I can remember specific patients that they had more energy, a little bit more talkative than usual, wasn't sleeping as much. They'd had periods of depression, and they qualify for bipolar 2. But they were functional individuals. They were not, it wasn't to the point where they're psychotic, usually, from my experience, at least in hypomania. And you can live a pretty good life, and especially if you're put on medications, can help you. Typically a mood stabilizer.
So Dr. Clark diagnosed Carly as being bipolar 2. Do you agree with that diagnosis based off your evaluation and the review of all of her medical records?
No, I do not.
And why is that?
Well, politely and respectfully to Dr. Clark, providers can review different things and we can draw different conclusions. Looking at our reports, my sources are about 8 pages long. I stopped once I got to about 100 because I couldn't keep listing my sources that I reviewed. It was exhaustive. And when I looked at his report, it doesn't, at least that he wrote, I didn't see that he reviewed that much. And so I suspect that we came to different conclusions because we may have reviewed different material. My opinion is that, based on reading his report, that some of his opinion of diagnosing Carly with bipolar disorder was that he took Dr. Hardy's notes for face value. And when I read Dr. Hardy's records, importantly, he never said, Kevin has bipolar disorder and I reviewed the records from his recent hospitalization, or he has bipolar disorder because he met these criteria. He essentially just says he has bipolar disorder and he used to drink and maybe do a little bit of drugs, but doesn't do any of that now. And so I really, only having 3 visits for 1 hour with no collateral records, minimizing his substance abuse, and then prescribing him the controlled substances he did, I just wonder, did he have all the facts? And if Kevin doesn't legitimately have bipolar disorder, well then Carly, it's a lot less likely that she would. And then I go back and I look at Annette Bryant's records from 2015 through 2019 when she's young. There was no mention of manic episodes or hypomania. Then I look at LPC Kirk's records from January through March. There was no mention of hypomania or mania. Then I look at nurse practitioner Lieber's medical records, and there's no mention of hypomania. And then I looked at the UMMC records with the well child visit, and there was no mention. And so, given all of that, and given the fact that Carly acknowledged using marijuana, and there's discussion of when that started, text message conversations between her and I think Thad, he talks, it's not a text message, I think it's a really, really long Snapchat message. I mean, the Snapchat message was this long. It was pages and pages of a Snapchat. So he talks about, thank God, she stopped using marijuana, all these substances. He mentions that around Christmas. So she would have been doing it at that time. So long story short, given all of that, I highly doubt and do not believe that Carly has bipolar disorder.
Oh.
I want to walk you through the second diagnosis that Dr. Clark gave to Carly. Was based on her, it says, several year history of auditory hallucinations occurring quite frequently. Dr. Pickett, I want to know, in your review of the records, was there anything to indicate before Carly was arrested on March the 19th, 2024, that there were any auditory hallucinations?
I believe in her journal, she did write one time about the voices, as I spoke to earlier, about hearing them ravenously, and thank goodness, physical confrontation was not realistic. So yes, she did mention it there. I was highly skeptical of that because it seemed more theatrical and making light of something that, as I've seen patients who really suffer from this, they are haunted by it. It is torturous to them, and they do not describe it as quite silly, and they do not trivialize it.
This video has ran long, and she is still on direct. But we're going to wrap this up, and then I will do another one. I mean, thought she'd be finished up. Man, he's been on a long time. Good Lord. This is devastating. Devastating. Response textbook perfect to questions. He asks her stuff about, describe to me your racing thoughts, and she gives like oceans. So what is that? Just waves of thoughts? And he picked up on it that it was BS. That it was BS. This is cool. He said, no, he said it was too numerous, hundreds of things he was referring to for his research to get a diagnosis. And he said Dr. Clark didn't have any. So he don't know how he came to his conclusion. This guy is thorough. There is no question how thorough he is. Wow. And the dad on all of these crazy drugs for years. It sounds like the dad had an abusive personality anyway. And he just did drugs and stuff like that. And it was abusive to Carly and to the mom. But he's saying, I don't think he had bipolar. So Carly wouldn't have been able to inherit from him. That squashed that. And he was pretty damn convincing. Now, again, the defense has to come up. Maybe the defense can get up and just poke holes in everything this man just said. But I'm highly doubting it, people. I am highly doubting it. Plus, how the defense is Miss Todd leading Carly in the interview, misdirecting, basically trying to trick him. We're going to use the word trick because I'm a layman. Trick and misdirect on how the diagnosis should go and what he's going to be writing down. Like he's going to take at face value things that Miss Todd says. This guy saw right through all that and wrote it in his report. Damn. This is devastating. Oh my God. And this was good. If anybody made it through this was phenomenal. Phenomenal. I'm just cutting the video short because people don't like to watch long videos, but I will definitely pick right back up right here on the next video. So this is going to conclude part 4 of day 4. My gosh, this was action-packed, guys.